Hello, and welcome to this on-demand session from Artlogic Connect, which took place in September 2025. We're so glad you're here. This year's conference welcomed over 4,200 people from across the globe, making Connect one of the largest online gatherings in the art world, a space where our community shared ideas, explored new perspectives, and imagined what's next for the market, a positive, opportunity-filled future. Artlogic is proud to host Connect as part of our mission to support the arts community and help every corner of the art ecosystem thrive. We're delighted to share this session with you so you can revisit the insights, the conversations shaping today's art world, all at your own pace. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started.
Thanks, John, and hello to everybody watching wherever you may be. As many of you know, social dynamics are a vital part of the art business. They're also often misunderstood or underappreciated, especially by people who are new to the space. This is one of the reasons, for example, that dozens of startups founded on the premise of just making the art market more efficient have crashed and burned over the course of the past 20 years or so. Turns out that a lot of people who come to the space aren't just looking for the smoothest experience at the register. They're instead looking for something bigger than commerce and in some cases bigger than themselves. So I'm fortunate to say that we have an all-star panel here to talk through how social capital works in the gallery sector in particular. So I'm going to introduce them now briefly. You can look at their bios in full online if you'd like. So first off, I will introduce Rose Easton. She is the founding director of Rose Easton, a contemporary gallery established in London in 2022 around a logic of world building articulated through a live program, texts, and much more. Next up, Sebastian Gladstone, who founded Sebastian Gladstone Gallery in LA in 2020 and expanded to New York this year with a program focused on emerging artists and overlooked historical figures. And last but definitely not least, Davida Nemiroff, who is the founder and owner of Night Gallery, which has been one of LA's most influential platforms for emerging artists over the past 15 years. Thanks everyone for joining us. I would love to start kind of at the beginning of everything, which is to say, galleries are weird businesses, partly because in a lot of cases, they come out of a kind of social and cultural ferment rather than an entrepreneurial perspective or even somebody having like an actual business plan. I'm wondering if we could start with each of you kind of going around and talking a bit about how socially grounded the beginnings of your own galleries were. And Davida, since you are kind of the ranking member of the panel here by virtue of having your gallery launched earliest, I was hoping you could start.
Sure. Yeah, Night Gallery, just kind of in its title, started exactly what it sounds like. It was a night gallery, and it started right kind of immediately after I graduated from getting my MFA, and was definitely a kind of post studio artistic practice and showing my peers from school. That was kind of the jumping off point. And then I also opened it in a city that I was relatively new to. So it also enabled me to connect with new friends and artists here in LA. And then it kind of took, it became a phenomenon and was very much like a social gallery space. And ran like that for 3 years, where it was open from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Um, and that was a long time ago. And I have just kind of maintained the same ethos while also transitioning to a more sort of conventional gallery platform. But the like social fabric of the gallery has always been the most crucial part of the decision making, and just every aspect between like the staff, the artists, our programming, and my life, my actual life. I met my husband the day Night Gallery opened, and we have children, so it really actually has fostered, another generation of humans.
Sebastian, you also started as an artist, I think, before you became a dealer. Can you kind of talk about your origin story in this regard?
Yeah, I started kind of, I guess, curating various projects in Los Angeles in 2010, so 10 years before the gallery actually started, mainly because I just didn't understand as an artist how you kind of would get any sort of opportunities in the art world. And a lot of my friends felt the same. So we just kind of started doing our own things. And then in 2020, when I started the gallery, similarly, it was just the network of people that I knew, the artists that I had either worked with at various places or just had collaborated with. And that was kind of what the fabric of the gallery was. Especially when you're starting and you have nothing going on, you can't exactly just go up to people who you aspire to work with typically and offer them things. So yeah, it was very much a not it was the expectation was not to have the gallery as it functions today. Um, it was similarly like quite a social experiment with like no real planning involved.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by how that happens. Like I've heard so many versions of it from people who become dealers, and they're sort of just in a position at some point where they're like, "Oh man, one of us is going to have to do it, so I'll just be the one who goes off and like actually starts some kind of exhibition space, so that the people I know will actually have somewhere where they can actually show the work that I'm interested in, kind of bring to the rest of the world." Rose, can you kind of comment on your side of this?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I mean, similarly to Davida and Sebastian, the gallery was started as a project space that we got given a room in a building that we could sublet for 6 months, and it was a very DIY, like last minute project where my husband did the build out. We did the first show was with one of our best friends, and it was much more about using the space to try and program 6 shows in the same space rather than like kind of nomadically doing projects elsewhere. And it was never, yeah, we were never intended to stay for longer than 6 months. We didn't even set up a business. We chose a font off Word. It was very basic. And then some collectors that I work with today walked into the first day the gallery was open and bought 2 works off the walls, and that day we had to set up a business and a bank account. So up until that point, we just like hadn't really even thought about it. And that is definitely like the way that it started. And the first 6 shows were people that we knew already, or people that I was friends with or interested in, or were mostly in London. We had no budget to, ship works in. So it was all very um, low key. But from the beginning, we always did events like screenings, reading groups, talks, um, poetry nights, and that was the most important part, to work out who was the community around the gallery, who were the stakeholders outside of just the artists and the collectors and like immediate collaborators, like who were the people that were interested in being a part of it. So like that's the kind of thing I guess that has carried on.
Yeah, and the idea of the word community, I think, is really important in all of that because that comes up a lot in terms of dealers talking about what their program is about, the kind of what they're trying to cultivate through the gallery. And I'm just wondering, what does the word community actually mean to each of you in this space? Like, how does a gallery's program inform the community that grows around it and vice versa?
Well, for me, I think the word community takes on a number of different meanings, in that there's like the community that comes to the gallery, there's the community of artists that we present, and then there's the community of people that work at the gallery, which, in many ways is the community I'm most interfacing with, like on a regular basis. I mean, there is like, I guess you have to believe that there's crossover that exists between all those different communities. And I mean, I didn't even mention the collector community, just Only because like where Night Gallery is situated, it's very much like has positioned itself closer to artist studios versus where close to where collectors live. You know, it's a downtown gallery and it has a different approach. It's definitely artist leaning, but it does seem to be like the key component to its success. Like a good work environment, a good exhibition environment, and a good place to visit.
Yeah, and actually, before we move on, Davida, can you like kind of situate what downtown LA means? Because
I
I
could
feel like
never.
I lived there for a long time. Like I know that that doesn't mean the same thing as what it does for saying like downtown Manhattan or something. Can you just kind of like flesh it out for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think downtown LA is really uh, kind of like a port, if you will, like a place where like it is like a warehouse district. It is mostly things kind of moving in and out. It's like a distribution center for the rest of the, the LA, the city of Los Angeles. But it's not like full of high rises, and it's not, people don't necessarily live downtown. You are kind of like an anomaly if you live downtown. It is a pretty, can be considered a little bit rough around the edges, like in that like there isn't I'm not sure who is taking care of downtown, to be totally honest. But yes, we are like downtown, we are, there are lots of warehouses where we are, and artists have studios, and it also, there's lots of gallery spaces. There has been a long history of gallery spaces downtown. Some come downtown temporarily and then they move on. Obviously some galleries are, don't, they're kind of projects that have time limits, and it is just not the center of the city. It is um, it is an industrial part of Los Angeles.
Yeah, if you were trying to locate a place to like really build a strong social scene, it might not necessarily be the place that a lot of
Yeah, Night
Angelinos would
Gallery
pick.
is definitely a destination gallery. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like where we have this like viewing room in New York right now, and we're in Tribeca, and it's like the polar opposite, where it's like just literally in the heart of um, the conversation.
Yeah.
Both
Sebastian,
have
oh, sorry, go ahead.
advantages and disadvantages. Just they're just two different ways of operating.
Yeah, Sebastian, since you have spaces both in LA, not downtown, but in LA and also in Tribeca, I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about how that side of things works, especially in terms of this idea of building a community.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it exists within the gallery and also kind of with other galleries that we kind of either collaborate or cooperate with. I try to not have, just with my personal gallery, any sort of hierarchical system between the artists, collectors, other dealers, where, some of my collectors will hang out with the artists that I work with, um, curators, other dealers. Like there's a lot of kind of intercultural dialogue, in particular between like a few other young dealers, specifically in downtown New York and in Los Angeles. Like in New York, for example, King's Leap, Alec Petty, Tara Downs Gallery, Harkwick Gallery. There's a lot of kind of, yeah, and in London, like Ginion Frederick, shout out Freddie. There's a lot of kind of a group of young dealers and artists, and like we threw a party in New York the other night, or like 2 weeks ago, with Tara Downs collaboratively. And there's a group of people that kind of comes regardless of if we're in LA or New York or even maybe Miami. There's kind of this similar group of people that have a dialogue with each other, which is really nice. And I think somebody once told me that a gallery is an island, and for me, I feel like that's just never how I felt. Like I think like sharing resources, sharing information, being more transparent with artists, about the realities, being more transparent with collectors, about the realities, like those sort of things exist when you have community, when you can be more vulnerable and you can, like I've definitely had moments where I've said to collectors, been like, hey, this is actually like been a difficult time for us. Like if you could support us, it would be amazing. And that vulnerability has actually come through to, people participating. So, for me, I think community exists, my whole life kind of exists in art, and the gallery. And there's not a lot of separation at this point. And I think for most dealers, this is the case where you hang out with your artists, you hang out with other dealers, like everything, like it gets into your relation. Like there's not a lot of separation, so like some other dealers know my mom now. It's like hilarious. Um, so yeah, I think for me, the idea of community just exists. Like, how do I want my life to look, and how do I want to exist within the group of people that I exist with, and also the idea of like giving back. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Feed the Streets. And last year we curated a show with Sayer Gomez where we raised about $100,000 for the organization. A lot of that money ended up actually going to the fire relief because they opened up like soup kitchens in LA, so for me, I think it's always changing, and I'm always trying to kind of examine like how my role exists within the ecosystem.
Rose, I saw you kind of nodding vigorously when Sebastian was talking about the like thin membrane separating his social life from business. Do you want to add anything on that front?
Yeah, no, I think that's a conversation that I've been having a lot with people recently, where there's almost no boundary between work and pleasure. And I mean, I've been talking it in a way to do with the way that a lot of people get exploited in the arts because of that, because of the fact that we all work in an industry that we love, and you're friends with your artists, you're friends with dealers, exactly what Sebastian just said. And sometimes there I am privileged enough to like love what I do and love and have created my own world, but for others I think sometimes it can get a little bit tricky with that no division. But I think that I don't have that much more to add. Sebastian said it so well. But I do think that in terms of thinking about like the social capital aspect and the community, that has been the like greatest pleasure is to think about how, if I don't have that much going on outside of the gallery walls, what can I bring into the gallery that like brings me and the people that I'm with uh I mean, joy is so cringe to say, but I can't think of another word right now. But it's something where it feels like my brain is alive and on fire, because as much as I love exhibitions and having an exhibition run for 2 months, there's something about like reactivating that over time that allows for you to have like better dialogue with the people that are coming into the gallery. Um, but yeah, I was mainly just thumbs upping Sebastian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really important point. There are not really all that many businesses in the world where there is such a close connection between work and play. Like, if you own a hardware store, it's not like at the end of the day where it's like, oh yeah, I gotta like we want to go hang out and talk about lawnmowers or whatever. Like, this is just not that. So, but as we're talking about all these social dynamics and everything, I want to ask about, I guess, the personality fit for that. Like, is it possible to be a good gallerist without being kind of naturally inclined toward socializing? Like, if you're not born as a social animal, can you kind of still get by in any kind of a way? I mean, Rose, I know you just spoke, so I hesitate to go back to you, but like when we were prepping for this call, you said something in particular about sort of how you think about yourself in regard to that question. I'm wondering if you could kind of expand on that for the audience.
Yeah, sure. I think I was saying that I classify as an extroverted introvert, which I think is actually like standing me in good stead for this. And I'm the kind of person where when I'm surrounded by people, I actually feel quite happy. But then the idea of having to be with those people before is like gives me like full body shivers. I think that like following on from what we just said, a lot of the people that I love in my life are the artists that I work with, the other dealers that I know in like the vicinity of the gallery, um, and uh, and so kind of cultivating that and being able to explore those relationships, actually I find quite easy. I mean, Sebastian mentioned Freddie, but from Ginny and Frederick, and me and Freddie are very close and have like collaborated on shows before and speak almost daily. And I'm in a little enclave in East London where Maureen Paley is, and Herald Street, and Mother's Tank Station, Project Native Informant. So I'm very lucky to and I'm the youngest, like the upstart within that group, and I have found them to be incredibly welcoming. And somehow having a bit of a kind of firm base within that has allowed me to be a bit more extroverted, I think, or like to be a little bit more embracing of it. But I do find the kind of some of the social aspect hard. Like I find fairs difficult, like having to stand on a booth and be able to like bring people in and catch their attention in 30 seconds. That's hard, but the social aspect in terms of like having people come into the gallery to do a reading group, that stuff is great. So it's kind of like push and pull. And I think once you feel like people are drawn in, I think the dream, I can't speak for everyone, but my personal dream is that we just have a relatively small group of collectors that we work with who are kind of loyal to the gallery and who come to every dinner and come to every event, and we kind of and they know the artists really well and the artists know them, and through that I feel a lot more confident and socially apt. Not, is it apt? Yes. But on the kind of, if you throw me in the room in a deep end, I'm probably going to cry, especially because I don't drink anymore.
Sebastian, Davida, anything to add to this little line of questioning?
I mean, I think I've always been confused, I guess, about like typically, as far as my socializing in the art world goes, uh, I think the main function of going to openings for me is that as a dealer, we all have the same hours. And so if you're going to see an art show, you have to go to the opening, or it's really hard to see the shows. And I think as far as like hanging out with artists and stuff, it's nice. But yeah, I similarly don't, I mean, although I probably am considered quite extroverted and social, my preference is to sit in a Russian bathhouse and sweat quietly, but while staring at the ground. That's my idea of fun. And another thing I'll say is like, it's really nice. Like I'll run into Davida and maybe we've been at a fair all week, and it's like, we're the only people who understand the experience of each other, of like what it's really like to sit there. And you can have these really nice, like 10 or 15-minute conversations, maybe in like the shitty exhibitor lounge waiting for like a $30 sandwich or whatever. And there is something really nice about that, the camaraderie of like, so you've been asked if you're the artist for the 10th time today. And, so there is like, I don't know, there's different moments of it that I think I've found that are kind of special. Or even, we just opened a new space in LA and on Saturday, and David Kordansky actually left his own opening to come see it, and I stayed open like 5 minutes extra, and he like sped over, came in, and we had like 10 minutes alone in the gallery. And that was, there's like weird, I don't know, there's weird, and mind you, the entire gallery outside, there was hundreds of people stuck, and I was like, we're closed. And then he came in, and there was another dealer there, and we had a moment in this empty gallery. So there is like kind of special things that happen, or like in a studio visit. I think that's more my version of socializing, is like bringing a collector over to meet an artist, and like there's like a three-way conversation. Like that to me is like my preference, as opposed to like some, like I've definitely been at parties at like Zero Bond where it's like caviar and champagne, and just been like, I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be honest. Like I want to, so anyway, I don't know if that's helpful at all.
I mean, any mention of Zero Bond is helpful. Davida, I'm curious, like given the way that Night started, like you've very much strike me as somebody who was like really in her element in a social situation. Has having a gallery like changed anything about the way that you socialize over the years?
Well, I just also want to mention that I have been doing this for a long time, 10 years on both Sebastian and Rose, and like 10 extra years of openings, 10 extra years of dinners, 10 extra years of art fairs. Like it does kind of change you. I also like just as you change as you get older. Like you can't even help it. As you get into middle age, there's just certain things that you can and can't do. When you become a parent, of course you have like babies, but then your babies become children, and like it's just I'm at a different point in my life than I was when I was running, like when I opened my gallery. Certainly that was like you could call me like a social monster. I was just I recently went to Toronto, which is where I like, kind of came to in my 20s, and was very social there. Like so social that I felt like I needed to like leave to do something else in my life. And now, I live pretty remotely. I live outside of the city. I live in the mountains. Of course, I come to the galleries and I participate in the openings, but my favorite social part of running a gallery is definitely the quieter moments, the dinners, the kind of one-on-ones, and a little less interested in the parties and the openings and even the events. They're just not where my head is at. It's not like a bad or good thing. It's like I have people here that I hired to be there, and now I can't really stress enough like what the challenges are of being a parent in the art world, and how that is totally ignored, and how art fairs are scheduled on the days of school opening, and there's no empathy for kind of, I guess, being absent as a parent. So really, like, it's just I'm at a different stage in my life. But of course, if you catch me the right moment, I can be quite social,
The social monster
notoriously.
returns. She comes back out.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
But
yes.
does anybody actually enjoy their own openings? I mean, Sebastian, did you enjoy the opening on the
It's really funny. People kept being like, "Oh, you must be so happy," and I was just, my feet hurt. I was really tired, and people
I
kept
don't.
trying to. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think there's moments, right? Like, I think you have, like, we opened with Herman Cherry, and some of the relatives of Herman were there, and a few of them started tearing up actually because Herman had died in the 1990s, and that was like actually kind of cool. Like, that was like there was this really emotional moment where a few people were just like, "Wow, if he had been here to see this." I think it's that sort of thing, or someone surprising. There was a collector who was in town who lives in DC and just happened to be there and came with his daughter on the way to the airport, and like I was so excited to see them. So stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, those bits are nice, but the rest of it, I just spend obsessing that somebody's about to knock over a sculpture or like spill a glass of wine on me, or that I don't know. There's too many people in the room. I'm so paralyzed with fear, but I don't know. I think I've never met anybody that like truly loves their opening, so I feel like maybe it's one of those things where it's like it's a necessary evil, but it's also like when the artist is happy, exactly, and there's like moments where you somebody turns up and really connects with the work. That is really exciting.
Yeah, and to clarify, I definitely can still get that, those feelings. Uh, it's just, yeah, my
I want to
community is
pivot.
different.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk to Rose and Sebastian in another 10 years, and we'll see if they've evolved in the same direction. I want to pivot a little bit because as cool and as interesting and unique as it is for the gallery sector in particular to be so fueled by these social relationships, it's also obviously not just like a big traveling circus of people who like to hang out together. They're like it's still a business. And I'm wondering how money ends up changing some of these relationships over time, especially with whether it's with collectors or with artists or with, I don't know, other people in the ecosystem. Sebastian, I feel like you have a lot to say on this topic based on some of our previous conversations. I'd love it if you could kind of kick in with some thoughts on this.
Sure. There's actually a collector said a quote to me recently at a lunch, and he said, "You can't scale intimacy," which I thought was really interesting. Like this idea that to really have these conversations and relationships that don't feel transactional. Like to me, people go back and forth on this, but to me, a gallery is not a store. A gallery is somewhere you can buy things, but it is for me very much so much more than something where you're buying and selling something. And so I think cultivating relationships with artists, like I never do well with like a transactional relationship with an artist or a collector. For me, there has to be something deeper because there has to be trust, like a mutual trust between the artist that when they're not there, I'm going to be representing them, and with the collector that they trust in what I'm saying, and that I'm putting work into this, and after they buy an artwork, that I'm going to continue to foster the relationship with this artist and build this career. And so, for me, it's always examining like how I can deepen relationships with specific people and like build a sort of core of the gallery. And this gets back to this idea of community as well. I have a thing that I do where, we get a lot of inquiries over email, and I have the same thing that I say to all of them. I say, hey, I would love to have you get on a call or come into the gallery to talk more before we get into like PDFs. And 99% of the time, there's no response to that. People just want to get the PDF, see how much things cost, and move on. And in my experience, those things don't equate to sales anyway, unless it's like some red hot artist where everyone wants it and I can't. It's like, you can't fulfill that anyway. So I guess all that's to say that for me, and similarly to what Rose said of like having a few people, I really think it, especially in a time like this, you're going to be looking at a few collectors who really believe in what you're doing over the next 5 or 10 years, who are going to be supporting you, and that's why they're supporting you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, does anybody else have a similar kind of experience? Like if somebody that you don't know comes into the gallery or just emails you, whatever, and they lead with a like, super transactional question, they're asking you things like, oh, well, how much is this going to be worth in another 5 years or something like that? Like, how does it end up warping your relationship to them? Or like when people come with questions like that, does it ever develop into something more, or is it just kind of like, okay, this is somebody who's here to see if they can get a deal of some kind, and I'm just not really going to engage with it?
Somebody walks into the gallery and asks for prices, I definitely give them the prices. I'm not telling you I'm going to sell the work, but I'm going to give you the information, and I'm going to treat you the same as I would anyone else. I mean, that has happened, and I've been like bait and switched by artists, So it's not always like somebody's walking in and they're like, I'm going to buy this work. But if somebody's asking you questions about the work and it includes the prices of the pieces, of course I'm going to engage with them. The idea is that you treat everybody the same, regardless of if you know them or not. And then, of course, you can decide if you want to sell them art based on a conversation that continues. But I'm not shying away from somebody asking me about prices.
Right. The job is still to sell art at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I
Period.
think there's also, I don't know, because when I first started the gallery, I hadn't really worked in sales in any other gallery. I'd worked in a gallery, but not in like the sales aspect of it. And I think also a lot of the people that I encountered at the beginning were more established collectors. And then as the gallery has grown, obviously you're coming into, because I primarily work with emerging artists, naturally you're going to meet emerging collectors. And I think there's like a fine balance to strike between feeling, or I at least hope, like presenting the gallery as accessible and doing what Davida said, like being able to share the prices. I'm not trying to be smoke and mirrors and like you have to go through X, Y, and Z before you can get it, but also kind of like being a bit protective of the artist. And if somebody ever walked in and was like, how much is this gonna, and that has happened, or if it's probably not somebody that's walked straight into a gallery, but maybe it's a conversation that has arisen out of something else and was like, how much is this going to be worth in X amount of years? I mean, that would be a red flag for me, because it doesn't necessarily, and you probably haven't had that interesting or in-depth a conversation about the work with that person. But I also think that there's, culturally, conversations are very different. Like the conversations that I've had in Europe are very different to the conversations that I've had in the US. Like people just work differently. So I think it's also about, and this, you know, different if I go to Japan. Like, so I think it's also about recognizing how people communicate and how you can respond to them. But I'm definitely going to be picking up, sorry, a bit of a fangirl moment for Sebastian, but I'm going to be definitely picking up this asking people for a phone call, because I definitely respond to those email requests and people never reply, and you do just feel like it's a data gathering exercise.
Yeah, I just want to say also one thing like that was said that I guess I want to push back against the idea that like our job is to buy and sell art. I would actually say the transacting is kind of like a byproduct of what I consider my job to be, which is to be essentially attempting to define culture in my time through artists who are producing work and kind of making a statement about that, right? And to me, I see the transacting and the buying and selling happening as people who want to participate in the system that I'm trying to create with the artists that I work with. And if I'm doing my job well, not all the time, but the selling will be, I don't want to say effortless, but that to me is like maybe the easier part of my job sometimes compared to the risk taking or making. I've definitely done shows where I felt uneasy about it, or I was just on the phone with a museum curator talking about a show that they're opening and how they're actually wondering if there will be like political kind of retaliation for that, and so I do see the function of a gallery does go way beyond kind of buying and selling. And I think that gets, if someone comes in, there's actually, I'll just say this really quick because this is a funny story, but one time I was at Matthew Marks and there was an Ellsworth Kelly show and this guy walks in and he's like, wow, this is amazing. And he goes up to the front desk person, he goes, how much are these? And the front desk person at Matthew Marks has like a meltdown, like they don't know. So they get on the phone and they call someone and then they're like, someone's coming to talk to you. And then he gets on the phone, speakerphone loudly in Matthew Marks, which, and that basically someone comes in and like quietly whispers a price to him and he screams out 1.8 million, and just the dissonance of the experience between this novice person and maybe the snobbiest gallery in Chelsea, which one of my favorite galleries, but there was something so amazing about that. And I'll definitely tell people prices if they come in. I think it's much more of like this sort of digital sort of email thing. I mean, a guy came in the other day and was like, how much is this? And I told him and I was, he was like, I want to buy some art. I was like, I'd love to sell you art. And he didn't buy anything, but maybe someday he will anyway.
Well, just kind of to go back and sort of talk about what I said, I think we're already in that kind of idea that this isn't a store, that you can't just buy anything, and that the idea of selling work does literally support people's practices. It supports, number one, it supports the artist. Number two, it supports the gallery. Number three, it supports the industry at large. So I do think that while it might seem crass to say that selling art is the goal, it is about, it's not transactional. It's like kind of goes back to the community. And it really goes back to surviving and thriving and being able to do what you want to do. Because if you weren't able to sell the artist's work, which I guess Sebastian is suggesting that it is effortless for him, it just like is, we're there to, I feel like a gallery's role is there to kind of behave or participate in those transactions to allow for even the idea that an artist can have a studio practice and doesn't necessarily, or I don't know, it's like, it's a kind of a buffer for the reality of how a gallery exists. And I mean, every gallery exists differently. Everybody has a different business model. Everyone has like different relationships. And when I said that, selling art is an important part of the gallery's, operating procedure, it really is about support and to continue the work that we're doing. And I think it's crucial.
Yeah, I think that
And by
the
suggesting that it's just going to happen on its own, that to me is I feel like that is a little bit more of the smoke and mirrors.
it seems to me like the exchange is really prototypical of the fact that this is such a unique business to be in, because there's almost nowhere else where the question of there's somebody in the gallery and they want to buy something, should I sell it to them, would even be a question that the person standing between the customer and the product would ever make. Like, the notion that who it is, what you feel about them, how you can, like, whether or not you can trust them to be the right steward of what you're selling them, all those kinds of things. Like, car salesmen don't have this kind of ethical debate. This is something that is unique to the art world, if not unique, certainly distinctive. And I think, again, that just like speaks to what uh, an interesting and fascinating place this all is. I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A, so I think we'll flip it back over to John, who is going to now moderate me as the moderator by asking some questions from the audience. So John, if you can appear from your magical office window.
There we go.
Love to see you.
I almost don't want the conversation to end, and I just want to keep listening to you guys, but we do have to jump to Q&A. If anybody does have questions, please do drop them into the Q&A box. We'll try and get through as many as possible. We do only have 15 minutes left. So the first question is, how do you balance running the core and operational activities such as participating in art fairs, curating exhibitions, searching for new artists, while also working on building this social value, especially for collectors? Is it better to have different teams working on these aspects?
Yes. I mean, in an ideal world, I would love to have many different teams working on all the different aspects. Sorry, I just jumped in there, but uh, I think that is probably like the $1 million question. Like, how do you balance and manage all of that? And we're a very small team. It's like me and my husband and a full-time gallery assistant. And between the three of us, we try to manage that. My husband works very much on like working with the artist to in their production, like exhibition design, fair production. My assistant is a magic woman who like makes all the admin happen, and I guess I try and do studio visits and sales and the kind of social aspect of what we're talking about, all of the like, events programming. But yes, I would love to have many teams, please. Thank you.
Well, teams take a lot of management too, and they have their
Yes.
own kind of like, that becomes its own thing. That's an interesting question. Like, the more people you have, the bigger you have to be, the more it's kind of like chasing the dragon. It's a constant, I don't think you ever get to the point where you have a team big enough and not have the stress of what that team ultimately costs. And it is like, it's nice to hear Rose at the beginning of this panel talk about what her dream is, which is something that I guess stays concise. I don't want to say small, but like sort of concise. That being said, like, artists are ambitious, so they do want to see a gallery grow. Um, you know, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think I have like the biggest team from this panel. And I would say we're still short staffed by a long shot. And there's no way of getting to the point where you have a team and you are not doing anything. You know, you will always, if it is your business, and my gallery is a little different because my name's not on the door, but it is my business. You have to be responsible for everything, no matter if you have a team or not.
Great. We can move on to the next question, which is from Maria. And I do agree, I think the larger the team gets, the more the things happen. So from Maria, could you kindly explain why withholding prices within the context of emerging artists protects the artists?
Sebastian, this could be you.
I mean, I don't necessarily know if okay, well, I guess it's kind of a two-part question. So there's a situation, for example, where an artist that you've worked with for a long time started at a pretty low price, and then maybe now there's another gallery involved, or maybe the prices have increased, to whatever multiple, and there's people that have purchased the work at a much lower price. If everyone has an awareness that they think, if a big painting is now $50,000 or $60,000, that their painting is automatically worth that, and everyone tries to sell them at once, you can have a situation which we saw a lot in the last kind of market cycle, where essentially a bunch of people are trying to sell things at once to make their money back. And what happens, it's like a classic supply and demand thing, where all of a sudden the supply outpaces the demand. And what happens there is the demand kind of plummets. So I think in that sense, specifically if prices have increased, or if there's been a big secondary market price, that would be a reason to kind of insulate pricing. Other than that, as far as like an emerging artist goes, if somebody wants to buy something I think supporting emerging art is really important, because when you're buying a painting from an artist who it's maybe their first, second, third show, the impact that you're having on their life and their practice is major. You're buying a $10,000 painting from someone, that money could be paying their studio bill for a few months, could be paying it's the money they're using to eat. It's quite a substantial impact on someone.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. What is the role of the gallery beyond the sale of an artwork? In an era, I think we're talking about the physical space, in an era where art can be shown, sold, and experienced online, is it still worthwhile to open a new physical gallery space?
What was the first part of that question? What is the role of the
What is
gallery
the
apart
role
from
of the physical? What is the role of the physical gallery space beyond the sale of an artwork?
I mean, pretty much everything that we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
And
without, oh, sorry, you go, Davida.
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just saying, like, without a physical space, there is nowhere to convene. And I don't know, I'm not particularly a fan of looking at art online necessarily, unless I have to. And I don't like some of the best experiences I've ever had are of going into exhibitions, especially actually in commercial galleries. Not that I haven't been to amazing institutional shows, but sometimes like the experience of being able to like walk into a space and experience someone's work for the first time, or perhaps just like, I don't know, an incredible show. You can't have that from a screen. And I think part of a lot of what I think is the backlash of looking at screens too often is this kind of this incredible resurgence. I mean, in London, there's been like a huge wave of galleries that have opened in the last 5 years, myself included, and a huge wave of galleries doing live events that are like absolutely packed at each one. I think that there's like a hunger and an appetite for people to be in a real space together. So yeah, I would say that's why you would want a physical space, but I'm sure other people think differently.
I think also to the second part of that question, like, should one open a gallery in this day and age? I do think that My advice is if you want to open a gallery to show artwork that you're passionate about, then that's like kind of the most important thing. If you're opening a gallery to make money, I wouldn't do it. Not recommended. And if
Second that.
Yeah,
like, just if you're just looking for profit, it's not, because you always are constantly reinvesting in the gallery. And I don't think people are buying art online the same way they were during the last few years. People are definitely interested in seeing work in person. So that experience is crucial to the the selling of art, or the placement of art, or however you want to call it. But that has been a real change, a shift in the last year, 6 months.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would also just kick in and say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sebastian.
I was just gonna say something really quick, which is like I think the experience, the viewing experience of art, dramatically improves and affects my life. And living with art or being able to see it in person, go to a gallery for free, um, is I think especially when talking about trying to bring new collectors in and why they would want to go to a gallery and why they want to live with art. Just going somewhere and the experience of viewing is mind altering, and I think that is like the true cultural value of galleries.
Yeah, and I would just add to that too, since I don't think any of us expressly called out the pandemic shutdowns in the midst of all this, but I will just never forget going through kind of the darkest days of all that and hearing people say things like, "Oh, well, it turns out that you don't actually need to go to all these art fairs, and people will actually buy art online. And this is really going to change everything, and people are going to dial things back." And then,
Hey, Ren.
as soon as it was allowable for in-person events to happen again, they came roaring back, like possibly even went too far in some ways. But I think it just shows that trying to experience most art exclusively through a screen of some kind is just it's just not going to do it in the way that actually being a part of these kinds of social experiences, in-person experiences, it just takes it to another level. So I'll leave
Remember
it there.
when there was like an art fair that was like existed solely online, and like you would like virtually walk through it?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
the
painful.
VIP art fair. I think that was like 2010, 2011. So
Oh, this
yeah,
is
it was.
like this is in COVID kind of thing that I'm
Oh,
talking
okay,
about.
okay, that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was all depressing. It was just a matter of which era of depression you want to talk about, I think.
I mean,
That's
I think the
my editorial
most
comment.
important part is that like art changes lives, and art, if you're lucky enough to collect art, that's amazing, like that's such a great privilege. And I hope that if you have the means, you do collect art and you do it in a thoughtful, caring way. And, it's artwork is just it's such a beautiful antidote to the rest of the human experience right now, That's all I can say. I still love it. It still moves me. Even if I walk through a gallery quickly, even if I can discern what I like and don't like, like it's still kind of at the end of the day, yes, this is what I'm discussing with my, you know, small group of friends that I still have. And it's beautiful. I will say, I did get to see Neil Young last night, um, who, you know, is 79 years old, has stuck to his whole thing, and it was just beautiful to see an artist on stage delivering a message that hasn't changed. And he wasn't about to like give us like a live version of his classic songs. He was concerned with only the classics, but it was amazing. It was inspiring and it was emotional. And that's why I'm wearing sunglasses.
I almost want to end on that perfect note, but we do have time for a few more questions. So one of the other questions is, how do galleries think about trade-offs between hosting public openings and events versus keeping things more closed, VIP? Do we see a trend in larger galleries taking more of a closed model in recent years?
I mean, we kind of have moved towards doing both, because I do think sometimes that like the big public openings, if we're talking about openings specifically, are quite difficult to have proper conversations about the work. And if the gallery is absolutely packed, it's very difficult to be able to lead somebody around and talk about the work. And I find myself not in the best state of mind in those days, and I get quite stressed and I find it quite hard to talk about it. So we've started doing where we do a small dinner and walk through with the artists the night before for maybe like 10, 12 people who are museum curators, collectors, press, like a kind of intimate group of people that are specifically interested in that artist's work. And then the next day we have, or whenever, a couple days later, we have the big public opening. And then that means the pressure off, and the big public open is just about people, as many people as possible, seeing the work and the artist having fun and all the artist friends being there and doing like a big pub thing afterwards, which is like pizza and wine and very chill. And that for me is a better, I feel like you get the best of both worlds, and there's not some kind of like half-hearted attempt in the opening to try and do business. I don't know if that answers the question.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I think that's
No?
like
Okay.
a approach we do something similar. Thanks, Rose.
Yeah, likewise.
Great. So second to last question from Sarah. Could you give an example of one of your best activations in your space that you feel has strengthened your collector base? Sebastian, maybe if we start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to think about, to be honest, I feel like collecting is quite a private thing for a lot of people. And typically when I think about the activations of the space, they're typically more related to the general public, people who maybe collectors are coming, but it's not typically something that I see as like much of a selling experience. I guess one thing that we have done that's been pretty successful is we have hung the work that we're bringing to an art fair in the gallery. Like we have done, this will be our third year if we do it this year. We've hung everything when we're taking to Art Basel Miami in the gallery on a Sunday when we're photographing it, and done a brunch and invited people, especially because for the artists, sometimes the fairs, they've worked so hard on work for a fair and then it's up for 5 days and then gone forever. So to have that extra moment to have people come and thoughtfully look at things, that's been pretty successful for us.
Davida or Rose, any thoughts from yourselves?
We've done similar things. We have like a VIP event for a show that's traveling to Shanghai in November, and then we're kind of installing the entire show at the gallery on Thursday for viewing, kind of in a similar vein of like celebrating the artist here in Los Angeles with their peers and their collector base, and so before the work leaves.
Yeah, I can't think of anything specific, but I am now going to definitely take this idea of putting the fair booth up in the gallery before it goes. That is a very good idea.
Great. So we're on to our final question, which is, what is the most positive thing happening at the gallery at the moment for each of you?
Having a safe,
Yeah,
oh,
Davida,
sorry.
there
Just like for me as I navigate, being here, also as a Canadian turned American citizen, the gallery remains a safe space, a space for dialogue, critical and comedic, and really I'm so fortunate to be able to have this job and do this for a living. I feel so lucky every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree
In
with.
a relatively peaceful society right now.
What was the question? Like, what's the happiest bit of your
What's the
gallery
most
right now?
positive thing happening at the
What's the
gallery
most
at the
positive
moment?
thing? We just expanded the gallery, so we took over more space in our building. So now we have a second big exhibition space, and we brought our storage on site. My husband built a workshop in there. That's giving him huge amounts of joy. But I don't know. I mean, I actually really agree with what Davida just said. When I came back from summer recently and I was feeling so stressed out just about having to like back to school blues, and then we walked into the gallery and I honestly had like a massive sigh of relief. I genuinely find it like it makes me so happy being there, and it does give me, especially with this new space, like a bit of a pinch me moment. Like, I can't believe that this is something that I get to do, on a regular basis. And we were talking about the kind of magic of experiencing art in person, and like every time that I walk in to like an exhibition that we've mounted and turn it on in the morning, or I like instantly fit like, I don't know, I feel excited all over again, and like being able to, yeah, be surrounded by art all the time, like that's not a bad thing.
And Sebastian, for yourself?
I have a two-part answer, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First part, at the opening, someone brought me a Labubu. So I just want to say that thank you, Rabbi, for that. That was pretty cool. I never had one of those. Never thought I'd have one.
Did you get to open the box, or do they just hand it to you as is?
He interrupted me talking to a collector to go into my office and open the box, which was really funny. I think we're all participating in this, but there's been all this kind of press and talk about how art is over or the art market's done. We are all a testament to the fact that that's not true, and that we are all continuing to operate our galleries and to present amazing art that we believe in. And regardless of what anyone else says, and I think for my colleagues as well, like we will continue to inform culture and participate in that. And I think to me that is like a really it's a privilege to be a part of that, and to have the awareness of that, especially in this moment, is pretty amazing.
I think these are brilliant places to end. Tim, I want to give you the opportunity in case there was anything else you wanted to add towards the end.
I mean, Sebastian really, I think, nailed the landing there, so I'm not going to try to put any kind of extra gloss on it. I would just say thanks to everyone for being a part of the panel, first off, and then to everyone watching at home or in the office or on their phone while they're in the car or wherever else. And I hope that everyone got as much out of this conversation as I did, and thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our panelists, Davida, Sebastian, and Rose, and to our moderator, Tim. Thank you for joining us for our first day of Artlogic Connect. We'll be returning tomorrow with our first session, which is Art Deserves Better Design, hosted by Joe Elliott from Artlogic. And you'll be able to watch this on demand later this week if you wish to. And thank you once again to the panelists, and thank you to everybody for joining.
Thank you
so
Thanks, guys.
much.
Bye.
Bye.